I wanted to welcome you tonight. This is the second in the series of workshops for the Be Your Own Boss Bowl this year, the 24th annual. And tonight we're going to focus on market opportunity and competitive landscape. And one thing that is, before I jump into that, I want to urge all of you that are on the call tonight that if you haven't already signed up and registered your intent to submit, please take advantage of this minute here to scan the code, the QR code, and go ahead, fill out that short survey. It just gets you on our database. It also makes sure that we can then share back with you some great resources that are available as one of the benefits for registering your intent to submit. So we provide a shared Google resource folder. It's got templates for your submissions, some examples of past submissions and tips on how to prepare your submissions. Of course, the eligibility policies. We'll also have in there a folder that has all of the video recordings of the workshops and all the slide decks from the workshops that we do for the Be Your Own Boss Bowl program. And there's the judges scoring rubric, so you'll know exactly how the judges will be scoring your submission, and a lot of other important information that's in there. So I do encourage you to please scan that code if you haven't already. Make sure that you are registered so that you can get access to those great resources. All right. So tonight's topic on market opportunity and competitive landscape really focuses on three things, and that's the market, but also then digging a little deeper, the customers within that market, and then on your competitors. And one key element for all of these is you've got to do research. If you're really going to understand and be able to feel the pain of your customers and know what your competitors are doing and how they stack up against you, you need to do your research. And so tonight, we're going to be focusing on that. And we've invited a special guest to join us tonight who will be able to help walk you through and share some of the awesome resources available through the Temple Business Library. And so, just to give you a really high level before I introduce our guest, at the market, from the market perspective is, so what is your target market? And is it a mass market or is it a niche market? And then how big is it? And then if there's multiple market segments within that mass market that you might be targeting, okay, which ones are they? And how should you prioritize those? And then in terms of going a little deeper within your target market, it's like, so who are your real customers and or users? And you may have to be focused on both customers as well as users, because they may not be actually the same group. And then what are the most important problems that they're facing? What motivates them to take action? Where are they located? Who are their early adopters within those groups? Who are likely to be the people that would be first to act and adopt your product or your service? And then flipping over and taking a look at competitors. So who are your competitors? Direct competitors, indirect competitors. What other alternates or substitutes are out there? And then within that group of competitors, the product or service that they're offering, how does it overlap with your product or service? Or where are the gaps? Where are the gaps in terms of what your users need and what your customers are providing in terms of benefits or solutions to fill their needs? And then what's their competitive advantage? And then using all of that information to help figure out what's your competitive advantage over them. So as a little bit of a setup, hopefully in looking at all these different questions, it requires doing a lot of research to really be able to ferret out this information and do the analysis so you know where you stack up. And so to that end, I want to introduce our guest speaker for tonight, and that's Adam Shambaugh, who's our business librarian at the Temple Business Library. And I've included his email address down here. But Adam has been with Temple University how many years now, Adam?
13, I think.
Okay, 13 years.
Long time.
And he has, over time, he has become absolutely a go-to resource for the IEI and the people participating in our IEI programs. He has a wealth of information and has way more that he could share with you than the time that's available for tonight. So I'm going to ask you to please pay attention, take notes, but then also I'm going to encourage all of you to reach out to Adam at some point, if not between now and the Be Your Own Boss Bowl, but please reach out to him some point in time before you leave Temple University and just talk to him, meet with him. You'll really get a tremendous insight as to the value of information that's available to you for free if you're a student at Temple University, and through other means if you're an alum of the university. But with that, Adam, I'll turn it over to you. I'm going to stop screen sharing here.
Okay, very good.
All right.
Also, just if Lindsay or Greg, if you could allow me to share my screen, I'll go ahead and get started. And then we can, then I can give kind of a little bit of an introduction and also give you a little bit of kind of a framework of what I'm going to cover this evening. So let me go ahead and do that. Make sure I'm good to go here. All right, I think everyone can see that. Good to go, thumbs up, everyone. All right. So as Greg mentioned, my name is Adam Shambaugh. I am the library's liaison to the Fox School and to all of its programs and offices and entities, including the IEI. I've been in this position for a long time. I think the big thing that I hope you all take away this evening, the sort of overarching thing, is that the libraries exist to help you. And I have worked with students both within Fox as well as in other departments who are interested in small business development, launching a venture, maybe helping an existing company expand or scale upward. So I have a fair amount of experience in providing library service to entrepreneurs and prospective entrepreneurs. And so I'm going to bring that this evening to kind of a tailored presentation about library resources and services that I think will be helpful to you. Greg shared my email. Again, it's adams@temple. Another great way to get in touch with me or my colleagues is through the library's website, and I'll explain how to do that once I begin demoing. So that's library.temple.edu. Easy to get to. So a couple things. So I want you all to know how to navigate the library website, know how to use key databases, and then how to access library research guides. So these are guides that are created to really, they're sort of like a meta resource to help you understand the databases that exist and other types of tools that are available to help you in the process of coming up with your idea and sort of nurturing and building on that idea. I want you, obviously the impetus of this workshop is for you to find market, industry, and competitor information. I'm also going to add to that a few other things. One is how to find articles, aggregated articles. These kinds of resources, particularly from trade journals, are really helpful in getting you the information you need about market size, about industry landscape, industry drivers, and competition. I think the value of trade publications is incredible. And regardless of the industry that you're in, it's likely the case that there is a journal or periodical that is dedicated to individuals who are practitioners in that space. And that's often where you get a lot of dirt about an industry, about regulatory issues, about competitions, about technological innovation, et cetera. So I'll talk about that. And then, as I already mentioned, how to get in touch and how to request assistance if you need it. Just want to clarify a little bit about what I mean when I use the term database. I think sometimes I use terms like database and research in a way that's very library centric, and then folks coming from other spaces or other industries look at me and say, that's not what a database is. When I use that term, I really mean an organized collection of searchable information, not necessarily raw data. So depending on your industry or your background, you might have a different perspective on what a database is. So these can be data sets, they can be raw data, but oftentimes it is things like aggregated articles, even digital books, geographic information, industry reports, company profiles, et cetera. All of this is stuff that can be general. I'm going to talk about Google Scholar briefly, which is a very general database, but most of these resources are going to be very business and market research specific. These resources, they just offer you information that is better vetted than what you're going to find on the free web. And I'm not decrying or poo-pooing Google or internet searching or any number of other ways. I think I'm a very pragmatic searcher. I think it's important to just take advantage of any resource that's before you, whether it comes from the library or outside the library, and I'll mention that as well. But just know that by virtue of the fact that you are Temple affiliates, you have access to some really awesome resources, and I hope you will take advantage of those. And I should say this, because Greg mentioned this, alumni, the frustration with offering remote access to alumni is ongoing. It's something that we can't really do. I will say, though, that this presentation is for you, even if you are not an active student or staff member at Temple right now. And to that end, I would encourage you even more to reach out to me if you need assistance, if you need support, because I'm very dedicated to getting you the information that you need. Even if you can't retrieve that stuff yourself, I'm more than happy to help you with that. And if you have questions or need me to clarify, I'm happy to do that. This is like the pay dirt slide. If you're watching this on a computer, which you are, you can screenshot it. These are the tools that I want you all to know about. As Greg mentioned, there's not enough time to talk about all the resources that are available to you. These are the all things to all people databases that I think everyone here this evening can benefit from knowing about and being familiar with. The first is CB Insights. This is a company information database that is sort of an oversimplification, doesn't get at what it really does for you. CB Insights rocks because it covers so much startup information. So one of the goals for this evening is to understand competition. That's often hard to do when your competition are other startups, other small entities that may fly below the radar. CB Insights does a really good job of exposing some otherwise undiscoverable information about small businesses, where their funding comes from, what their activities are, et cetera. Simply Analytics gets at the deliverable of learning about markets and size of markets, and it does so via mapping tools and the ability to drill down and look at specific consumer markets at a very specific targeted geographic level is a unique thing that Simply Analytics offers, and I'll talk more about that. EuroMonitor is an international database. The name is a little, you'll say, well, EuroMonitor, why would I want to know about that? My business is in Philly. EuroMonitor also has a lot of good US data, and I really think it's good to be aware of this resource. And I think especially talking about market size and how it compares to other, comparable spaces or industries, it's good to know about that. And I think you can get a lot of information related to that using EuroMonitor. I'm doing this out of order, but IBISWorld is an industry database, easy as pie to use. You basically go in and keyword up what you need, and there are these lengthy industry reports. Number 4, I'm going in reverse order here, deals with aggregated articles. And what that means is collections of articles from different types of publications. I have 3 resources mentioned here: Business Source Complete, Science Direct, and Google Scholar. They sort of complement each other in some ways. I would say that Business Source Complete and Google Scholar are the ones that you should really know about. Business Source Complete is a flagship business database that contains trade journals, academic publications, industry and company reports. And Google Scholar, it is a refereed, peer-reviewed collection of academic articles. That sounds really random to be telling entrepreneurs about academic sources, but when you are in a space like technology or consumer behavior or government regulation or anything, there's likely good scholarship that has been done related to your topic. And sometimes I think it's helpful to be aware of that, all right? The other thing that I mentioned that I want you to be aware of are our research guides. The library research guides, the main page is guides.temple.edu. These are 3 library research guides that I have created that, that cover information that will be helpful to you. The market research guide is really good for looking at tools that explore consumer markets. Some of the resources that I mentioned on the previous slide are included in that guide, but also other types of resources that could also be of benefit to you. The small business guide, this is probably the guide that has the most non-library stuff in it. And I'll demo that and explain that. So that includes things like grant sources. Those aren't library links, but they could be helpful to you as you pursue funding for a business idea. And then the business research guide is the most general. All right. I'll skip this slide. All right. Research is research. I think you'll get the gist of it. This is the library's website. It is library.temple.edu. I'm going to take a pause. Actually, I need to pull up the library's website, library.temple.edu. All right, so I'm going to take a breather, and what I would like to do at this point is hear from some of you all, maybe some of the more bold souls. I see that there's 23 folks on this call, and I'm wondering if Greg can help me with this, maybe moderate or get some responses. I'm curious about the nature of some of the business ideas, what kinds of industries you're in, what kind of services or goods you're interested in providing, what kinds of challenges you're finding in getting the information that you need. So if we have some maybe bold folks who can talk a little bit about that, I'd love to hear about that. And that can sort of inform the demonstrations of the databases that I want to show to you guys this evening. So in fact, I'll even stop sharing my screen for a moment just so I can see you guys better. And if anyone has any thoughts or is bold enough to speak up, that would be great.
So Matthew's raised his hand.
Okay, awesome. Go ahead, Matthew.
So I'm interested in making an app.
Okay.
And I've been trying to find like, well, how much it costs to make an app,
right?
And like what what the competitors are doing and that sort of thing.
Okay, so like a mobile application, that might be the the basics of what it is you're looking for. Great.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to like wring information out of you, but can you tell me any more about like what sort of service you hope to provide or what sort of niche you're hoping to fill?
So my idea is an app to help you improve your vocabulary and grammar and spelling.
Okay.
So kind of like a Duolingo or a learning application, but specifically for improving your vocabulary and grammar and writing skills.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah,
right.
and I'd like to just jump in just to point out. So researching to determine what it might cost you to develop an app is definitely something you're going to need to do, right? But one of the things we're trying to focus on tonight, and I'll let Adam address this any way he wants, but the thing we're trying to focus on tonight is in terms of how you research the market opportunity. So researching, who would be the people that would use this app, and how big of a market is that? Is it growing? Is it shrinking? Thinking about your target market, whether or not you're going to be limited because of multiple languages. Are you going to want to launch in English? And then what's the second language or the third language? So you're trying to determine who and size, right?
Right.
Definitely researching, well, how much does it cost to do that? That's another thing worth doing. And that's something I'd encourage you to come on into the IEI, set up a call or a meeting with me or with one of our mentors, and we can talk about that as well.
Great. Yeah. And I think Greg points out a really good aspect of your project, and that is it's kind of twofold. One is the nuts and bolts of building and developing an app, but the other is the research into who the end user of the app would be. So, who are individuals who may be interested in improving their vocabulary or improving their writing skills or grammar. Would it be individuals working in a certain space? Would looking at employment statistics or what sectors people are employed in, would that make sense? The other factor is knowing, what are some other types of apps that exist that do something similar, and what has been their path to growth or success, or who's funded them, et cetera. That's often a good way to approach a project like this. So it is definitely multifaceted, as is the case with any idea. I don't know who asked questions next. So I see William's raised his hand, and we got a couple other folks, but go ahead, William.
Hello, y'all. So the project I'm working on, I've been here a few times, but I'm working on a STEM kit, and we're really looking to target like STEM educators, particularly in the Philadelphia area. So like local high school STEM outreach coordinators or, high school teachers. I did look at some competitors, such as like the Navy's like Sea Perch competition. But that's more like, competition instead of like a local, like DIY, high school teacher trying to find a kit that he can like integrate into his curriculum. So that's what I think my market is.
Okay.
But obviously I want to refine that.
So, I mean, it's a lesson plan. Is that kind of I don't want you to have to, disclose everything about it or, get too much in the weeds, but I'm curious who it sounds like secondary education would be the ultimate market.
So, they're like, we assemble these like educational type kits that would be ultimately our goal is for high schoolers, but I guess it could be for college students as well. But in my mind, that's what I was thinking, like the high school teacher could put, using this instruction manual and the kits that we put together using like an Arduino and some other like off the shelf parts, can put together some sort of like do-it-yourself project to learn like basic coding skills and work with common components that they could probably, get like a Radio Shack or like a local computer store.
Okay. Very good. All right. And I see Nathaniel also has his hand up. So Nathaniel, if you want to go ahead.
Yes. So I had a question. The project that I'm currently working on is a service-based project as well as an app, and it primarily ties to shipping and logistics. I pretty much formulated the idea based off of family members and other things outside the country, people that constantly ship, basically entrepreneurs, small to medium businesses. I have a lot of contacts within Central America as well as Africa, where certain groups of people will pull their resources and they'll order a container full of goods and things like that. But typically in those countries, they go through very small channels. And I guess getting a hold of these channels is very difficult to pretty much research and discover the process that they go to when it comes to exporting and importing these goods for, say whole communities or groups of people within those communities. So I'm looking for ways to get to that information, or without actually having to like sit on hold. I found a few companies would sit on hold and try to talk to somebody, just other ways to figure that out.
So it's you're saying you know, a community in Africa or in South America or Latin America, they might pool resources to purchase something that's needed for that community or for individuals.
Typically, say there's a small business in Latin America that buys certain goods from some state in the United States. They'll typically share in the purchase of a container, where they'll purchase a certain amount of square footage, or they'll just purchase the whole container, even if they don't need the whole container.
Right.
And with that purchase, they usually are incurring a significant fee, and usually all of the space isn't needed. But that is the process for them. So say just a group of businesses are pulling their resources to grab that from America to import it.
Right. Okay. Wow. So this is great. And I think even talking to you three folks really kind of elucidates the diversity of requests that I get all the time and that I've seen with the IEI competitions. So I'm gonna try to address these things along the way and think about, again, I'm not good at on the fly, seat of the pants type stuff, but I think I can maybe work some of these ideas into the questions that you all have, or some of the challenges that you might encounter. So let me go ahead and return to the library's website. And as I share my screen, let me figure out what I'm doing here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share this, and I'm going to talk about our resources, our services. And before I get into specific databases, the aforementioned databases, I do want to mention that a lot of my work and a lot of the work of my colleagues is done via consultation. If you have questions, really all three of those projects, they're fascinating. I think they're very things that can be pursued in greater depth by myself or others. Please reach out to us, email me directly, you know how to do that. Hit us up over chat. And the other thing to know about under this contact us link is a thing that says staff directory. And you can see here, and even just thinking about the questions that you just presented to me, there are people on staff who may be worth talking to outside of just the business liaison work that I do. There is a liaison for education, for example. There is a liaison for urban studies, for geography, for a number of these spaces that I think could be potentially beneficial to knowing about. There are librarians for healthcare, for other areas that often overlap with the needs of entrepreneurship students. And to that end, you can see that we've all placed our office hours online. So if you do have questions, if you think that it would be beneficial to you to meet with us, you can contact, and you don't even have to contact us, you can just schedule an appointment directly. So I'd encourage you to do that if you have a question, if you need assistance. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna start and talk about some of those resources. So the first thing that I want to talk about is industry research. So I'm gonna start big and then maybe move in a little bit. And I'm going to begin by talking about the broader context. And what I should say, I'm probably not going to monitor the chat while I do this. If you have a question, if something's not clear, please feel free to just unmute yourself and interrupt me. Greg or Lindsay, if you see that someone has posted something in the chat, feel free to let me know or read it out to me. And then we'll go from there. And I'll try to demo some of these resources, and I'll also try to address, some of the things that the three folks I spoke with brought up in terms of their challenges. So to begin with, the first resource that I want folks to know about, and I am indeed going out of order because as you have as you have talked about these projects, it's brought to mind some things with me. So the first thing that I'm going to mention is called IBISWorld, and IBISWorld is an industry aggregator database. It contains industry reports from all over, both consumer industries, business to consumer industries, manufacturing industries, service industries, and emerging technologies. Okay. And unlike, old school industry research where you needed to know industry codes, you can simply go in and search for a given topic or a keyword. And I'm going to start with Matthew. I think it was Matthew, his project. And I'm just searching for mobile app. And again, I don't know what I'm going to find because I haven't prepared, but I go in and I do the search and I see that there is an industry report for smartphone app developers. Again, it's not a grand slam. I would love if it were just an industry report about smartphone apps, but what it looks like is this is about the industry of web development. It's from fall of 2021, so it's pretty recent, which I'd say the reports are mostly updated every 6 months or so. And you can just use your own judgment about the time sensitivity of whatever research question you have or whatever it is you're looking at. IBISWorld is easy to use, and the reports are formatted consistently across industries. So some of the things that you can see here is it's going to provide you with an overview of the industry. They tend to use the words like supply chain and industry drivers, kind of that businessy jargon, even when they're not talking about a traditional industry. And you'll find that there are reports about things like education, healthcare, et cetera. So I think it's good to look at even if you're not in a traditional business space. So a couple things to note here. Looking at the overall industry at a glance, this gets into things like what are the key indicators and size and scope of a given industry. Farther down, looking at the industry's performance, I think this is great. These external drivers, key external drivers, these are things that might potentially impact your industry. You can see the kinds of things that that they're taking into consideration. So, these are all things that I think you could look at and that you could use to, potentially highlight, your topic and the things that you're interested in looking at. So again, I definitely take a look at this and go through this. I think there is a section on the competitive landscape. I think in this case is probably not going to be as helpful for most of the folks this evening because your competitors are going to be very small entities, very, one-off, one-person show, et cetera. But it could also be helpful for you. The other thing that I think is good, the operating conditions, et cetera, and then also statistics that are not only current statistics, but also projections or forecasts. So I think it's a good resource to look at for that kind of overview of the industry, of the context. I think, a couple of the resources that you mentioned, or a couple of the projects that were mentioned were related to education. And I might even want to search and just see what kinds of things are included here that might be relevant to you. I'm not super, I don't necessarily even know if the word STEM, educational services in the US. So I think I would even go in and look at this report and see, are there things that I can glean about a general report related to education? And especially, if you're looking for, a government report about education in the US, it's not necessarily going to frame it in a business context. And that's the value of an IBISWorld report. So again, this is from last fall, and it covers the industry in the same way it would any other industry, even though this is about a different kind of thing. I think, you know, I'm making up keywords as I go. I tend to be a lot more strategic when I do this. When I'm not doing it on the fly, I might think about, well, what are the sort of key terms like learning objects? You know, it sounds like, you know, a STEM lesson plan, you could call that a learning object. That might be a pedagogical term that's used. You may want to go in and search for and think about the way that other people in this industry write about or describe the products and services that they offer. So I think that that's a good thing to look at. Even, you know, some of the things like, you know, the size of the industry, that sort of thing, you know, how many people are at different stages of education at a given time in the US. These are good questions to look at. For Nathaniel's question, I should just mention that within IBISWorld, things are largely US. There are, however, global reports as well. So sometimes you'll see, you know, if you go in and you search, most of these guys are going to be US reports, but sometimes you will see either international reports or you'll see, you'll see the different kinds of reports that are included here. So some of them are from China, some of them are from Europe, some of them are more broadly about the global context. So it can be useful if you have more of a global project. There probably are other resources that I think could be helpful. Yeah, so this is about shipping, water transportation, you know, and again, this is only one facet of Nathaniel's business idea, but I think it can get some, you know, good information. My experience with IBISWorld is that for most people working with IEI, with the Be Your Own Boss Bowl, there's going to be at least one or two reports within this resource that touch on the kinds of questions that you have or the kinds of things that you're trying to answer. So I definitely encourage everyone to look at and be aware of that resource. The other thing that I want you to be aware of, and I mentioned, is CB Insights. CB Insights, it's a bit of an exception in that you need to register beyond just standard authentication with your AccessNet. You need to actually create an account, and you do that with your Temple Mail. CB Insights, and I'm actually in my instance of CB Insights, my profile. This is a resource that that gets at small business startup kind of endeavors and looks at funding sources. So the way that I have this set up right now, this is my profile. I'm looking at different sources of funding. So that's this column. I have specific companies that I track. I'm interested in looking at personally in machine learning and robotic process automation. So that's a lot of companies I follow are in that space. And then because I get so many questions about different industries, I follow different industries as well. Depending on what you're looking for, you can just simply search for company names. So my recommendation for William, Matthew, is for both of you guys is to see, are there other companies that offer something similar that might be useful to look at? And I just did like the kind of the crappiest search ever in Google. And I found I found this report, which is 21 innovative STEM education startups worth a follow in 2021. Okay. So I know nothing about this. So this is preliminary, totally anyone can do it, Google search that I just did. And I have the names of 21 companies here that I've never heard of any of them, I don't think. I would go through and look at pages like this and get a sense of, and you may already know this stuff, William, what are the companies that do things that are adjacent to what you're doing, that are either potential competitors, potential partners, or that, you know, that maybe are missing out on something that you understand that they don't necessarily have a handle on. What I would then do is go back to a resource like CB Insights and begin searching and see if I can get any dirt on those startups. One of the things that you'll find with some of these companies is that you can find out who provided funding for them. Who does CB Insights deem their competitors? You know, et cetera. So I'll just give you an example, and I'm going to cheat a little bit and give you an example of a company I know has a very rich profile, because I want you to understand the kinds of things that you can find and see within a resource like this. So you'll see here, when you look at this, this is for a machine learning company or robotic process automation company. And you can see the kinds of things that are presented here. So the company's financial performance, and if you scroll down further, you can see the entities who've provided funding at different stages. The way that other students, Be Your Impossible participants and other IEI clients have used this resource is to figure out who are the entities, investors who are providing funding in industries that they're interested in. The other thing that you'll see here is a list of competitors. So sometimes you'll get a sense of ideas of names of other companies that might be involved in what it is you're doing. And it's just a good way to get some, I mean, it's kind of like you're sort of stalking the companies and figuring out, you know, what are they about? What do they do? And where have they, where are their resources coming from? And I think CB Insights is really invaluable for that kind of information. So I would definitely encourage everyone to create an account and take a look at this. And I would use, you know, just some, you know, I had a student who a year or two ago, he was looking at vegan leather products. He knew the names of 3 or 4 other companies that were doing that. And he and I just sat down with CB Insights and plugged in the names of those companies. He found out who was investing in them. He approached those investors and was able to receive funding as well. So there's ways that you can leverage this resource pretty tangibly to advance your company and to gain some insight. Oh, the other thing that I'll mention, there's this section that says signals. These are media mentions. So where is a company mentioned, whether it's in a trade journal or on social media platforms like Twitter? These are places that where you can, you know, kind of get even more information about individuals, investors, et cetera. So yeah, CB Insights, really a good resource to know about and to take advantage of. So just make sure that you are looking into that, because I think that's really helpful.
I just shared in the chat, the young gentleman with the vegan leather is Zimri Hinshaw. He's from CLA.
Okay.
He is only 22 and he just received $550,000 in funding from AIs and VCs and was just written up in Forbes. So I shared the article about him.
Okay, then I don't feel bad about, you know, saying, I mean, I should just say a thing about confidentiality. I would say something about vegan leather. I would not disclose further about the particulars of his business.
No, yeah. You're
but
fine.
no, I mean, I just want to say
the funding raised is public knowledge, and
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so
what I can say about that student, I loved working with him. I think he typifies what I love about entrepreneurship students and people pursuing entrepreneurship.
Absolutely.
The utter risk tolerance beyond light years beyond anything I can conceive of personally, the innovation and just the drive to do something, even when, you know, his roommates think he's crazy. I really
Adam is saying his roommates think he's crazy because he was literally making kombucha leather in his dorm room.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, everyone knows this kid, I think. Great story. but CV Insights proved to be really valuable for him along the way. And I think that's true for a lot of other students who work with IEI and with Fox. So for sure. I want to talk about markets because that's another thing that you all need to know. And some of those resources that I just mentioned will do that a little bit. But some of the other tools really can get you where you need to be as far as just the depth of you know, and also granularity of consumer information. So I'm going to start with Simply Analytics. And I'm going to go in and talk about what this resource is. You don't have to register to use it, but it's a heck of a lot of work once you start creating reports in it. So you probably want to save the content that you generate. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'm going to sign in here. All right, so when I'm in Simply Analytics, what this resource is telling me or providing me with is consumer and demographic information at specific geographic levels. And the consumer information isn't just necessarily who buys what product, but also what kinds of lifestyle habits, choices, and attitudes they have. So I think there's a lot that can be gleaned from this, whether you are a business to consumer industry, or if you are working in a more B2B space. I still think it's helpful to know some of this information. So the first thing that you see here that looks like a big mess is actually a map of Philadelphia by zip code, broken out, that breaks down household income, median household income, which is a census data indicator. It's pretty basic. Anyone who knows anything about Philadelphia knows where the money is and where it's not. So this isn't a particularly surprising map, right? Some of the other things that I can look at about our city are a little more interesting and maybe a little more surprising or more interesting that, you know, so if I go in and I look at this, so here's a question about the use or interest in organic foods. So if I'm, you know, interested in starting a business that's related to that, I can go in and I can see where those populations might exist, and that somewhat correlates with income, and it somewhat doesn't. I can go in and I can see all sorts of, you know, things that are interesting, you know, activities. So people who enjoy bicycling a lot and do it every chance they get. That's a survey question from Simmons, which is a market research outfit that exists both within the city and in the suburbs. People who take public transportation to work. So I'm just giving you an idea of the kinds of information that you can find. There are literally thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of variables that are available within this resource. So I would for sure create an account and begin to play around with this. Even if you don't necessarily have a project that is tied to Philadelphia specifically, or have a business to consumer industry, I still think there are ways that you can use this. So I'll give you a couple other examples. One of the views that you can select within this resource is a comparison table. So I have some of my other variables that I've looked at, and I have kind of populated this table with different metropolitan areas. So if I'm interested in seeing how Philadelphia looks as benchmarked against the United States or against other big cities, I can go in and find that information, and I can, you know, add other locations very easily here. So if I just go in, do a search, I can add a location and it just appears with those variables populated, or those numbers, percentages populated within the variable rows. This is a really good resource. So if oh, I want to launch my business in these cities based on these indicators, I think that's a really powerful way that you can leverage the information in Simply Analytics. One of the things that I should say also with this resource is, I think a lot of students, you already know a lot of things intuitively, and I think that that's really valuable. I think my experience working with participants in the Be Your Own Boss Bowl, you've already done a lot of legwork. You're already hobnobbing and networking with folks, and you know things. But in order to demonstrate to an investor that you can quantitatively prove that there is a market for something in a certain place, that speaks volumes to them, and it has really powerful rhetorical value. Even if you already know, you already understand something maybe intuitively or through experience, being able to support those understandings with data can really help you and really get you far in terms of working with an investor, working with someone who might potentially partner with you. So those are things to take into consideration. Other things to note?
Adam, could I jump in just a second?
Sure.
Yeah, I wanted to just make a comment because one of our participants tonight, Ronan, joined a little bit late, but what you have up on the screen right now is a really good example of something and how it could be used, of research and how it could be used towards a particular business. So Ronan's business, he's currently launched his business. He's currently, going to be selling in this region, but we were on a call earlier talking about, well, what would be your rollout to other markets,
Right.
and that would be something an investor would want to know,
Right.
Well, what's your plan to roll out, and why are you picking this particular order? And so being able to do the research, pull up the data and be able to go back and say, well, we've done the research in these particular, metropolitan markets, and this is what it's telling us, and this is going to justify
Right.
the launch, the sequence of our launching into each of these demographics really, as you said, is powerful. I mean, that
Right.
really helps to give you credibility in talking to your investors, because it isn't just a gut feel.
Right.
It isn't just you've talked to your uncle. It's like, no, I've got the data to back it
And,
up.
and I don't want to dismiss gut feelings and talking to your uncle, because I think there's some value in that sort of qualitative aspect of starting a business. But I think sometimes I have students on the other end who say, why the hell do I need to know about all these numbers? I already know this stuff. And I think my comment on that is, you're not an island, you really need to communicate to a lot of different kinds of people who respond to different kinds of information about what it is you're doing and how you're going to proceed and scale. So yeah, I mean, that's definitely that. I think this is a really good point, and I think both things are really valuable.
Yeah.
Other things that you can do with this resource, I should just mention rankings. If you want to rank zip codes in Pennsylvania, or you want to rank counties, or I should say zip codes in Philadelphia or counties in Pennsylvania, you can do that for all manner of variables. You can do that for all manner of geographies. So if I want to, go in and look at, things like gym membership, and, I can go in and rank based on that. I can cut my results in a variety of different ways. The other thing that I can do is look at different geographic locations as well. So, maybe I'm looking at setting up a business in a certain neighborhood. If you have a sort of physical, a business that's tied to sort of a physical existence, brick and mortar or something else, or even how you market or promote and where you do that, these kinds of rankings of geographic units can also be good. So that's a thing that you can use this resource for. I wanted to mention also with these maps, there is a way to filter. At the moment, when I do this, I can only look at one of my variables at a time, right? But if I wanted to filter by certain thresholds, maybe I wanted to see neighborhoods where the household income was above 75K, and there were a lot of people who had high school students at home, or who were vegetarians, or whatever. I can do this using this filter feature, and it can show me all the all the zip codes or all the counties within a certain region that provide, that meet those criteria. So that's one of the ways that you can use Simply Analytics. The other thing that you can do with this is look at different businesses. So in this case, I can go in and I can search for businesses by NAICS or SIC code. I can also go in and search by keyword. And I like to do this because SIC codes are sort of crappy and sort of restricting. I did this for some students recently. I'm sorry for using a, something that's not directly tied to what you guys are doing. But what this is doing here, if I look for businesses that have the word bike or bicycle in them, it allows me to plot out all the bicycle services, bicycle retailers in Philadelphia. And when I click on one of these dots, it sometimes will give me multiple entities. So even that can be helpful to you, especially for some of you guys who are more like doing brick and mortar stuff. Where's the competition? Where are the different partners? You can search for company names, but you can also search for the types of industries that they're in, things like that. If you wanted to search for sushi places or whatever, you can find that information. So there's just tons and tons of data, tons of ways that you can exploit this resource. When you create a report, you can do a lot of different things. So if you want to look at a radius, a geographic radius, how many people do this within a 5-mile radius, or how many businesses of this nature are within a 10-mile radius, you can create that. There are other things like if you want to look at just general correlations about populations, the related data table will allow you to do that. So it's a good resource for that kind of stuff. The challenge with this resource, and I'm thinking about Nathaniel, is that it's totally US centric. And I wish there were, in my perfect world, there would be data available for every country and every location that are as robust as what you find in the United States, and maybe even more so, but that's not totally the case. And that's why I mentioned EuroMonitor to you all, not only for folks who have an international component in their project, but also for the awesomeness of the US data that are included within this resource. So, if I jump in here, EuroMonitor is aggregating data from across a whole bunch of different markets for mostly business to consumer industries. And there's a lot of really cool information that you can find within this resource. So I'm going to do a couple things just to demo how this works, and I hope you'll get kind of a feel for what's available. So I'm going to start with a search at the top. My first search is going to be for a country name, and this is how I'm gonna rock this. I'm going to start by looking at statistics, because if Nathaniel or anyone else who has kind of an international component to their research needs insight about a country, and insight that maybe is beyond the typical CIA World Factbook, middle school research project, you can see that they're giving you good information about economic conditions within an area, consumer markets, spending power, etc. within a given geographic location. And you can kind of manipulate those data. You can look around and you can see the different things that are included. So I would definitely use this resource for any kind of research that you might be doing. The other thing that you'll see are product and industry specific reports for given countries. So, you know, I'm focusing on one location, and I'm sort of, frankly, I'm intentionally showing you a smaller country in the non-Western world to show you that even those locations are included and represented here. I can tell you if there's reports in these areas for Nigeria, there are reports for just about any country in North America, Western Europe, Central Europe, and the wealthier Asian countries. So these reports get at some of the questions that you have about market size, some of the information about what the broader context might be for your market. This is the kind of stuff that you're going to be able to find, and it does a really good job of representing this stuff both descriptively via analysis, as well as visually and quantitatively via data graphics and infographics and tables. So this is just kind of an example. The other thing that you can do, I've searched for country names or a country name. You can also go in and search for products and see the kinds of things that are included. I would probably, I would try to look. There's also things like reports and stuff like that that are included. So I'd probably just play around with search terms until you find things that, maybe get at, oh yeah, this is, exactly. I mean, I'm searching smartphones. Maybe I should have searched mobile phones. But I want to give you kind of an idea of what's available and what this looks like. And I'm going to cheat and use my Control F here to get to the US. So for you guys who are not interested in, at least yet, in the global context or implications of your research, you can still go in and find very good US data about different products. So, you can kind of see the sort of information that's being presented here, and even things like, related products. So, whether it's technology or consumer electronics or whatever within the United States, and then the context would be other geographic locations for the same area. So definitely check out EuroMonitor. It's a weird database that has two names, EuroMonitor Passport. You can search for either one within this database interface to get the information that you need. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit because I want to talk about articles. And I particularly want to talk about these trade journals and those kinds of publications. I'm going to start by talking about Business Source Complete. Business Source Complete is one of two aggregators, the other being ABI-Inform, that focus exclusively on business publications. So Business Source Complete, ABI-Inform, these are their competitors themselves, but they compile all these different business-related publications, scholarly stuff, trade journals, etc. So I'm going to go in and search for mobile apps, and I'm just going to, that's a totally janky search. Again, if I were being a little more strategic and had time to kind of mold this over, I'd think about maybe a more targeted search term or a little more industry specific search term. And what I can see here are the variety of sources that I'm getting in this resource. I can cut my results by source type, and some of the ones that you should be aware of, I've said this before, but trade journals. These kinds of publications are so important because and I've seen this with consulting students, with small business students, knowing the ins and outs of an industry, you can really get granular stuff and specific names of individuals, things like that, through a trade journal. SWOT analyses, I think especially the opportunities and threats outlined in a SWOT analysis can be good for an entrepreneur to understand, because another company's opportunities and threats are going to be your opportunities and threats as well. You know, so you can go in and see the different things that are included here. One of the things that I've mentioned a little bit, I touched on before, is that you want to cut your results and think about when the information was published. You obviously want very current information, and you can do that with this resource. You can do it with any resource to get the most current results. I think for both Matthew and William's questions, something to be aware of that you might already know about are the other types of databases that exist that are not related to business. In your all's case, the two that I would recommend are ERIC and Education Source. And ERIC is right here, and Education Source. These are both education databases. So I'd be really interested to see, is there any education literature, education reports that are related to this issue of using technology, mobile technology or other types of things to kind of help people learn more about STEM in one person's case, or about grammar, vocabulary, and improving writing and communication. And you may find that in the education literature, there's good stuff that's available. So, you can do all that at one time using EBSCO's interface, starting with Business Source Complete and building stuff by clicking on Choose a Database or Choose Databases. Want to mention, I don't want to, well, let me just briefly mention Google Scholar, because to me, knowing about, especially really with all three of the folks who spoke up about their project, I think that looking even just a cursory glance at academic literature could be really valuable, especially if you know, and you do know, the keywords and the language that's used, understanding, theories of pedagogy, understanding what kind of tools are being developed, the technological changes. And in the case of Nathaniel, logistics, I mean, there's entire fields dedicated to logistics, shipping container stuff. What are the regulatory issues? Are there ways to streamline this? These are the things that there are scholars who explore this stuff. I don't think you should read a whole bunch of peer-reviewed articles. I think you should look at abstracts, get some ideas about, the basics of what's going on, and go from there. So you can do that in Google Scholar. It's the easiest way to find academic peer-reviewed literature. If you guys were a group of grad student scholars, I'd say, there are other things, other ways to do this, but to get a general idea of new trends in technology or education, this is the fastest and easiest way to do that. So yeah. I want to also mention library research guides, and this will be my last thing that I show you all through the library's website. So at guides.temple.edu, or you can click on the link that says research guides. This will get you to our homepage for these tools that are created in-house to help you navigate and make your way through our resources. And they're arranged by subject. For you all who spoke up, you may want to look at geography databases. You may want to look at education databases to see, are there things that I might not even know about that could be helpful to you. A couple of the tools that I've created with entrepreneurs in mind, market research is a research guide, and then also the small business development guide. So I'll show both of these. The first one here gets into the particulars of consumer research more. I showed you a couple of these tools. I did not show Mintel. That's probably worth a look for consumer information. I also didn't show MRI because that is a big can of worms. But I still, you know, if you want to know, set up a consultation, take a look at this guide. We did talk about Simply Analytics, and I looked at, you know, a few of the other resources listed here, and then there's some that I did not mention. There's other things like advertising information, other types of stuff, doing industry research, etc. The Small Business Development Guide, which is also under the business category here. This is the resource where I've included, you know, things like, you know, industry and market research and other types of things, but I've also included things like sample business plans. You know, I think for a lot of folks, you know, they would say a business plan is a very old school or traditional way of approaching coming up with a business idea. I understand that, but I also think it can be good to look at sample business plans to see the sort of very specific components of coming up with a business idea. The other thing that is cool, this is from the free web. On SlideShare, there are examples of actual companies, famous companies, pitch decks. And I have not looked at this and made sure these are current, but you can see, you know, LinkedIn's original pitch deck. You can see, you know, a number of companies, what they looked like when they were first starting out, and how their pitch decks looked. There's probably a lot more than this on SlideShare that I haven't dug up yet, but I would encourage you, you know, just like I did a Google search to find out STEM lesson plans, I would encourage you to see, can I find good sample pitch decks on SlideShare or some other web resource that can be helpful for you in thinking about how you present your information, how you conceptualize that. So I think the free web is really powerful, but I also think that you should really bolster your research by taking advantage of a lot of the databases I showed you tonight, and then other resources that are outlined in the business research guides at guides.temple.edu.
Adam, sorry to interrupt. As
Greg I'm just about done, so go ahead.
Oh, cool, yeah. I was just curious if you could send the link to the, I joined a little bit late. I was just curious if you could send this link, whether it be in the chat or if it'll be provided.
Oh, yeah.
That seems like awesome resource.
We are being recorded, right?
Yeah,
Greg?
I think so.
Yeah, so I'm sure there'll be a recording, and I can send my slides. I can share my slides with Greg as well, or Lindsay.
Thanks so much.
Whomever. Yeah, absolutely. I'm kind of at the end, and I might have skipped over some things or was a little random. That's kind of who I am. But if anyone has any questions, or because Greg and Lindsay have been at this for a while also, if there are things that I can add or address or clarify, I'm happy to do that with the time we have left.
I did have a question. So if we were to set up a consultation with you, obviously we're still figuring things out. Should we have like a specific question, or in the consultation, will you kind of like address some of the things that you've seen? A lot of like the young people going into the competition have trouble with, that don't generally address when they start.
Well, yeah, I mean, what I can say is that I work with students or Be Your Own Boss Bowl participants kind of at any stage of the process. So, you know, I think sometimes people come in and it's like a very nascent idea, and we work through that, and I kind of ask questions, sometimes, you know, contentious questions, just to better understand what it is you all are doing and what kind of stuff you're looking at. And then, you know, if there are particular things, I mean, it's a pretty grueling process. I think you understand that, and I think everyone who's made it this far understands that. But yeah, I mean, I am willing to, of course, work with you, and you don't necessarily have to have really well-defined questions, but I'll try to address the considerations that you do have. And if there are other things that I think of that maybe you haven't considered that I think are important, we can talk about those as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else?
Adam, one question I had, and I haven't actually gone to some of the resources you shared tonight, but our business is in a industry that's still very young. We do have several key competitors, but none of them have gone public yet. Do you think we'll struggle to find, like, for example, when you were on CB Insights, you were seeing like the different series funding. Do you think that's something we'll be able to find, even though the companies?
Yeah, I've been impressed. I definitely loaded the deck there and showing you that UiPath profile. That company actually just went public. But I will say I've been able to find very small companies such as vegan leather companies in CB Insights, and even very small, Philly startups with just a handful of people. I think there's good information to be found in CB Insights for some very small companies. I've also been totally let down by it too. So, I mean, I won't lie, but I think you should be able to find at least some competitive information. And you didn't ask this, but I'll address it anyway. The whole issue of being in a very new field, sometimes a couple things that could be interesting to look at would be like those trade journals. If there's an industry kind of associated with it that might report on that, I would take a look at some of those publications. The other thing is Google Patents. If it's I should say this to anyone, and it may not apply to you, but looking around in Google Patents it's a cool resource for just seeing, are there ideas that I have? If you have a product that's going to be patented, has somebody done something similar? What's the status of that? I think that's a good way to, I do that with a lot of engineering students who go into startups, but that might be worth looking at. And even news sources, we have databases that are newspaper aggregators. Sometimes you can find good things about specific companies from news sources too.
A follow-up on that, one thing I've always been curious about is like understanding more about the patent process. Would you be like familiar enough with the process if like we wanted to talk about our specific like how we do our operations and like trying to determine if something is worth pursuing a patent in?
I'm very good at referring people to people who know things that better than I do. So, if you send me an email or, send a query to the library page or something, I would track down probably not a patent attorney, but just someone on Temple's campus who knows the answer to that. And I might even kick you back to Greg. You might get the Temple shuffle, to be honest with you, but
that's okay.
We would figure it out.
That'd be great. Yeah, that'd be huge.
Yeah, no, that's a good question to direct to me, Ronan. All right.
Awesome.
I mean, yeah, Adam, I'm not saying don't talk to Adam, but yeah, you can bring that question back to the IEI as well.
Awesome. That'd be great to talk about.
All right.
Okay. Adam, once again, thank you so much.
Definitely.
It's incredible how much information you can dig out of all these databases. And really, I would encourage everybody to think about, you have to answer questions as part of your submission. You have to answer questions, getting to know who your real customer or user is, but then also, the size of that market and how do you define that market, and, understanding in depth about your competitors. And Adam actually brought up as an example in his discussion, something that I hadn't really thought of, but I put the note into the chat. And that was, in researching your competitors, understanding who's funding them, when they got the funding is important. Also understanding if they've been acquired and when they were acquired and how much they were acquired for can also be helpful, because when you think about what your potential exit strategy might be, it's helpful to have those comparative numbers to be able to talk about or show to a prospective investor so they get a feel for other people in your market. Similar businesses have exited. This is what they got for their exit, when it took place. That's all great information, and it shows a sign of knowledge and maybe a little sophistication in terms of that you're an educated entrepreneur as opposed to a rookie entrepreneur. So thank you, Adam, again. Really appreciate you joining us tonight.
Yeah, definitely. I just, I thank everyone for taking the time to listen to me. I wish you all good luck. I encourage you to get in touch if you feel that would be helpful. And with that, I will sign off.
All right, very good. Thanks, Adam.
Take care, guys.
Thank you.
All right. So we're at about almost at about 6:30. Adam's presentation went a lot longer than I thought it was going to. So what I'll do is I'm going to go ahead and I'll share the FLDP point slide now, because the workshop is supposed to wrap up at around 6:30.
If you're a grad student and looking for the code, just send an email to byobb@temple.edu and just say, I'm a grad student. I was at the BYOBB workshop last night.
All right, but I'm going to ask you to quickly take a look at that. And then for those of you who maybe want to go a little further with the topic, I have some other things that I really wanted to cover tonight. And I'm happy to stay on and go through them with you, although I recognize some people have reached their limit in terms of the time commitment. But I will hang on, happy to do that. If you've already gotten your FLDP points, I bid you adieu. All right. So let's go back here a second.
I also just chatted a link to, I think it's a 4-question survey, just about the workshop tonight, if you just have a minute or two to complete that.
Thank you, Lindsay. I forgot about that. I actually had the slide for it, but I forgot to put that up there as well. So you people are really hardcore. Stephanie, Jediman, is it Healy?
It's Haley.
Haley, okay, Haley.
Yeah.
Right.
Hi.
Well, thanks for hanging in there. Let's see. Hopefully, and I guess I'm not sharing the right screen. Let's try that again. Here we go. I wanted to go back, and I'm not going to go into depth on any of this. I just want to show you quickly the slides that I had here. I'd encourage you to take the slide decks when we post this along with the video and go through it and take a look at the notes for some of these slides, which will explain in more detail what some of these slides are supposed to be covering. But this is, I think, important stuff in terms of thinking through for your submission for the Be Your Own Boss Bowl. So can you all see my slide, BYOBB rubric for market opportunity? Yeah, okay. So, in this shared resources folder, there's a document, I believe it's called the submissions rubric. And you want to take a look at that. The beginning of the document talks about how you'll go ahead and submit to the competition. But the second half of the document actually shows you the scoring rubric that the judges use as a guide, and it breaks down the categories of what they're looking for and the points. And in there is also a list of some questions. So this is to get you focused on making sure that you address those questions for each of those sections in your pitch, in your executive summary, in your financial projections. So within the market opportunity, they're really asking you to focus on what market segments are you trying to address? And are you looking at a mass market? Because that takes one style of marketing to a mass market, your sales channels, your distribution channels, potentially even your pricing strategy are all determined by whether or not you're going after a mass market or a smaller market segment or niche market. So you need to know that. And I'll get into that in a little more detail. But you also need to talk about your customers and your users and what are the problems that they're facing specifically. Again, in the shared resources folder, we've given you the whole first chapter of this book, Business Model Generation. So it's up there as a PDF, and on pages 20 and 21, it will talk about and help you to understand what exactly we're looking for in terms of your customers or users, who they are, how you've defined that. We're also looking for, in this section of market opportunity, is, what's your specific value proposition? And actually, next week in the workshop, we're going to have Sean Boyce with us, and he's going to walk through an entire business model canvas, which is what this book is based on. And he'll get into and talk more about what your value proposition is and how you determine that. And then last but not least is the size of the market. And that's not just today, but also what's it projected to be. So it's important, if you're going to be building a new business on a particular market, investors are going to want to know, well, is that market growing or shrinking? Okay, so in terms of your market segments, like I said, you need to understand who your target users or customers are. And often it's helpful for you to know what to develop a customer persona. How old are they? Where do they live? Their gender, their ethnicity. There's all kinds of factors, their spending power, their socioeconomic status. There's all kinds of factors that go into determining your customer persona. And then you may have a business that could be focused on several different market segments, and that's great. But I would encourage you to think about trying to narrow down and choose one as your target to launch. All right, I've seen past companies who've identified, we're going after this market and there's 6 different market segments and we can address them all. Well, that may be, but as a startup, you probably don't have the funding, the resources, the time to go after all those markets. So which one should you prioritize? Okay, and it may be that the largest isn't necessarily the one you should go after. It might be that the one that's the easiest to reach, or the one that has the greatest pain point. So you need to think about those kinds of things when you're trying to determine that market. And then, of course, the point of tonight's workshop with Adam was to show you you've got to research these, but there are tools available and there are resources available, as in the Temple Business Librarians, to help you with a lot of this. I also put a note in the chat earlier that a lot of our past BYOBB finalists end up commenting about how they spent a lot of time working with Adam and having Adam help guide them on some of their market research. So I'd encourage you to think about that and take advantage of that resource. So market size, all right? How big is the pie and how big is your slice? And here, a lot of companies fall into a trap of looking at a total market and thinking that's their market. So if you're selling, and I'll use this example, if you're selling a particular new styled cup holder and you want to sell that into the automotive industry, you don't go at this by saying, well, the automotive industry is, $600 billion a year, that's my market. But that's not your market. That's the auto market, right? The whole auto market. Your market would be the number of cars being sold that could use your particular type of cup holder. All right, and that's different. And so you need to understand how you address or how you look at and define a total market, a serviceable market, or the market segments that you can address, and then what your slice of that would be, which is the market share. And again, this is where all of that research using the resources of the library really come in handy. I'll give you another example of that, and that's that if my business was, I'm going to be making energy efficient replacement windows, all right, and I said, well, I'm going to take a look at, well, what's the entire construction market? I can do that research and come up with that the whole addressable market for construction is $172 billion, right? But that's for the entire construction industry, and that could be worldwide. But that's not my business. My business is energy efficient replacement windows. So I might want to narrow that down and say, well, as I launch, I'm not going to be shipping windows overseas into the European market or the South American market, right? I'm going to focus on North America. And so that narrows it down even more, all right? But then I also have to take a look at, well, I'm not, again, selling windows or doors to the entire construction industry. I'm selling energy efficient replacement windows. So all of that new construction is not my market. I'm only looking at existing housing, existing buildings that are out there and trying to research, well, how many of them are there? How old are they? And looking at, well, the typical lifespan of a window might be 50 years. And I'd be trying to size my market of, well, how many buildings are out there that are that old that could potentially be a customer for me because they need my energy efficient replacement window. So it's this, I call it peeling the onion. It's understanding who you're really selling to and then doing that research to whittle it down to get to that number. And it does make a difference. It's a rookie mistake to say to a potential investor, I'm in the energy efficient replacement window business and I've got a $172 billion market that I'm selling to, because they're really sharp at being able to get right to what the market size is. So, all right, another example that I'm just going to blitz through this is Airbnb. There's two slides here. You know, one way of coming at what's Airbnb's market is, don't worry about the dollars, just try to figure out who your customers are and how many trips they're booking. So that's what this slide represents. Total trips booked worldwide. Well, that's not my Airbnb market because I only book Airbnbs online. And typically it's people that are looking for, although this slide's a little dated, it used to be people looking for budget accommodations. Now, not so much anymore. So here it's whittling down from 2 billion trips booked to how many trips booked online that were budget to how many trips were booked, could be potentially booked through Airbnb. And here in the small print, they're saying, well, we're estimating we get 15% of that available market. So 84 million trips booked. But that doesn't give you the size of their market in terms of dollars and what the revenue is. So now you take that starting number at the 84 million trips, and now you start working back towards the dollars, all right? So a typical Airbnb stay might be 3 nights at $80 a night. Again, this is an old slide, but it gives you the idea of how you do this. All right, and then that still does not determine, so it's not $320. That's not what Airbnb's market is. It's their commission off of that booking. So again, you'd have to look at, well, what's Airbnb or your potential commission fee? Oh, that might be $25. And so now it's the 84 million trips booked versus that $25 commission fee that shows you what your potential market size could be. I'm not going to do this. If we had more time, I'd show it. This is a great, very short video from Dream It Ventures. Dream It puts out a lot of great short videos to entrepreneurs just starting out. This one's, again, taking these last couple slides I zipped through. And this guy talks even faster than I do, but he gives a really great, easy to understand definition and highlights a lot of the mistakes that people typically make, again, when presenting their market size to investors. I'd encourage you to go back and take a look at that when you get a chance. All right, so in terms of the rubric for the competitive landscape, here you need to be aware first and foremost that there's all different forms of competition. You have direct and indirect competitors, those who do exactly what you do, and those who do something similar to what you do. All right, that's the indirect. Then you also have alternates to what you do. So products that aren't directly or even indirectly related to your product or service, but they're just another way of solving the problem that you're trying to solve. You need to consider them as well. All right, and in this case, you're wanting to look at what your competitors' competitive advantages are, and what strengths they have that are keeping you from being able to compete with them, and barriers that are keeping you from competing with them. And then you're going to be doing the same thing when you develop your business model and looking at, well, what strengths do you have over your competitors and what barriers to entry can you create to keep other people from wanting to come in and join your market and try to take part of your market share. We talked about this in last week's workshop. A good way to do this competitive advantage exercise is just to say, our company is best at, and then why. And this is something that takes a lot of work to do. You might do this 20 or 30 times until you can really narrow down and focus on something that isn't exactly the same as what your competitors are saying. All right. This is a very short video. Again, I'm not going to get into this tonight because of timing, but another really short video, 3 minutes, that talks about how you can think about and how you can determine competitive advantage. And one of the things I'll tell you right now, it says is this takes a while. This isn't something that you're going to come up with first. It might be something that you come up with at the very end of this process of getting ready for the Be Your Own Boss Bowl. And I'd even suggest that some of you may not have this pinned down for the Be Your Own Boss Bowl. Some of you may take months beyond that, but it's worth thinking about and working on. Now, next week, our workshop, as I mentioned, is going to be Sean Boyce, and he's going to be going over the business model canvas. That's this little black box at the top. But that center box in the middle is what is called the value proposition. And just to highlight for next week, the value proposition is all about what value, what are you doing for your prospective customers? What value are you creating for them? And there's a process that hopefully Sean will get into next week, where he's talking a little bit about your customers all have pain points that hopefully your product or service is going to try to address. And then they also have gains, things that they'd really like to have. They aren't necessarily pain points, but they'd be bonuses. If you could provide a gain, something to them that they weren't expecting, that delights them, it could be the difference between them staying with what they're currently using or you winning them over and changing to your product or service. So be aware of that, think about that for next week. And hopefully Sean will get into that a little bit more. Another thing just briefly is looking at these adoption barriers. So you're going to have some type of relative advantage. How are you better? What does your product do that's a little better than what it's replacing? And then there are factors you need to think about. So how compatible is your product or service with what your customers are currently doing today? Are you introducing some new kind of technology that they're going to have to learn? Is it going to be difficult for them to learn? How compatible is it with their normal daily routine? How simple is it for them to understand? All right. Is there a long learning curve or just a short learning curve? How trialable is it? Is it something that they actually could try? And for those of you that are familiar with, in the software world, the freemium business model, which is we're going to give you our software for free. Here's an app. Try it for free. You have a 30-day window to try it. Or the basic version is free, but if you want to step up to these higher function, to get greater benefits, now you have to jump up to a paid subscription. So making your product very easy to try is important. It's helping customers get over that barrier of adopting your product. And another one is observability. All right. So how can you make it easy for your customers to see your product or service in action, for them to see the benefits that are going to come to them? And that might be through watching other people use your product or service or getting testimonials from them, so that it's easy for them to see the value that you've provided to these other people. And now they can relate to it and go, you know, I could use that same thing. That would really help make my life easier. All right. So again, you need to think about your direct and indirect competitors. You're going to be doing your comparison against them. There are a lot of things to be thinking about in terms of your competitive analysis. Most people focus on the product or the service itself, okay? And that's fine. That's a great place to start. And you're going to look for the benefits, the gaps. What are the things that your customers could use that your competitors aren't providing? Or you're going to be looking at what are the things that your competitors are doing that overlap. They provide the same kind of value that you provide, all right? Obviously, the gaps are the ones you're the most interested in because that's where you can provide a competitive advantage if you fill that gap. Other things that people typically look at when they're looking at their competitors is pricing. That's kind of an obvious one. Am I more or less expensive? Okay, but think about, what about marketing and sales channels? Are you going to be advertising or promoting your product where your customers are? I hope so. Are you going to be selling it where your customers are? Are you going to be making it easy for them to sell it? All right. So for example, if you're a brick and mortar store and you only take cash, that's not going to be a good business model for people who come in and want to buy your product, but don't carry cash anymore. All they carry is a credit card or their Apple phone, right? They're using Apple Pay or Google Pay. So you need to think about, it's not just the product or service, but your whole business model. And where can you be better than and make it easier, make it more enjoyable than your competitors are for your customers? Other things to think about is how do you service your product? Okay, what's the warranty compared to your competitors? Again, I mentioned ease of purchase. How easy is it for you or for your customer to buy it from you? We talked about simplicity, compatibility, observability, and triability, but here's another perspective as well. From an investor's perspective, what about the costs? Not the prices to your users, but the costs to manufacture it. Are you going to be able to provide this product or service at a higher margin than what your competitors are providing it at? Because if so, that could be a difference. That could be the reason why an investor invests in you and not in your competitor. Okay, so are you cheaper? Is it cheaper for you to build it or even to deliver it to your customer? Also, capital expenses. I mentioned last week in the Simply Good Jars example that an investor coming into Simply Good Jars, one of the attractive features was that Jared's business model only required $4,000 of capital to put it into a building location versus $20,000 for one of his competitors. So how are your expenses lining up? And then also, what's your customer relationship and how are you going to be better at what you're doing? Are you going to meet your customers where they want to be met? And can you develop any kind of loyalty programs, affinity programs that not only capture customers, but keep customers? So these are all ways that you can be better than your competitors. And a lot of these are things people never think of or never consider. All right, here's another short video. Again, I'm doing all the talking, but another short video to watch at your leisure. I encourage you to do that. Again, it's about a 4-minute video that'll give you a quick overview from a different perspective on the competitive framework. We showed this slide last week. We prefer, and most investors prefer, this kind of competitive grid that shows multiple ways that you're better than your competition, as opposed to just doing a competitive matrix that only shows 2 comparative axes. All right. Whoops. And there are lots of other resources. Obviously, tonight we featured Adam and the Temple Business Library, but there's a lot of other data out there that he did not talk about and that is accessible to you. So some of this information, there are various investor and analysts reports that you can access. Adam, I'm really glad he featured, in fact, I'll put these 2 links up in my next slide. He featured these market research and small business guides that also provide links to other great resources for you. So examples of slide decks, examples of business plans. These are great things for you to use as benchmarks for your own submission. And then I want to point out the BRIC, which is the Business Resource Information Center at the at the Philadelphia Free Library, a great program. I know some of you on this call have used it. I encourage you to go there. They offer lots of free services. And this could be particularly advantageous for alumni, because whereas Adam said some of the databases are not accessible through Temple for alumni unless you work through him, back channel it through him, the Temple Free Library, they probably are accessible for you. So again, I strongly encourage you to look him up. All right, I'm sorry for keeping you so long tonight. I'm going to stop. Are there any last minute questions? Anything anybody wants to go over? Oops. All right. William, nothing?
Maybe just about the video, but I don't know if you addressed that in the last workshop, but the Shark Tank video, I don't know if do we have to make a couple videos for the competition as well? Or no?
Not unless you make it to the finals. So you have to submit a pitch deck, and in your pitch deck, you're going to want to make sure that you know, in PowerPoint, you can put notes at the bottom, right? So when you submit that pitch deck, you're going to save it in notes format, and you're going to save it as a PDF, and you're going to upload that as part of your submission. You're not going to do a live pitch. You're not going to do a video recording of you pitching it. It's just going to be that pitch deck. So you want to make sure that the things that you'd normally be saying in your pitch, you put into the notes as your script. Any other notes, anything else you want the judges to see relative to that slide. All right, now, if you're one of the top scoring teams and you're selected as a finalist, then yes, you will be doing either a live pitch or a recorded pitch, and then that will be what the final judges will be scoring you based off of.
All right, thank you. And the mentorship program, I guess I could probably find some resources later on. I don't want to hold you up, but if we wanted to talk with you or one of the other mentors on Startup Tree or something, could we just schedule that anytime?
Absolutely. If you go into Startup Tree, are you on Startup Tree?
Yes.
Okay. So the thing to remember about Startup Tree is that you always have to be booking a week in advance. All right. So today's Wednesday, you would not be able to book an appointment with anybody on Startup Tree for this week. All right. And you can book appointments for next week all the way up through Saturday night at midnight. Starting Sunday morning, you can't book any appointments for next week. Okay, so I encourage people start looking at mentors in different areas, different expertise, and start booking appointments in advance, and just get them on record, get them in the system so that you know you have those time slots reserved. And you can meet with as many mentors as you'd like in a given week. You can meet with the same mentor every week, or you can meet with a different mentor every week. You can meet with 4 mentors in one week. All right.